If you like this video, please give a thumbs up and subscribe, it really helps out our channel. Hit the bell icon to be notified of new videos. Background: the following article was written by Bill Chalker and is archived here for reference and background to this case. The Boyani Visitants of 1959 by Bill Chalker. In 1959, Papua New Guinea was still a territory of Australia. June of that year saw the spectacular sightings by Father William Gill, an Australian Anglican missionary, and 37 members of his Boyani mission. Gill made notes about the experience, which the media obtained. Stories appeared in August, causing a sensation. I have had 2 extended interviews with Reverend Gill and was impressed with his quiet and certain manner in relating the events. What follows comes from his own account of the affair. Only the day before the sighting, Gill had composed a letter to the Reverend David Jury, acting principal of St. Aidan's College at Doggerah, to accompany a report regarding a UFO sighting made by Stephen Moir, an assistant teacher at Gill's mission. Dear David, have a look at this extraordinary data. I am almost convinced about the visitation theory. There have been quite several reports over the months, from reliable witnesses. The peculiar thing about these most recent reports is that the UFOs seem to be stationary at Boyani or to travel from Boyani. The Mount Pudy vicinity seems to be the hovering area. I myself saw a stationary white light twice on the same night on the 9th of April, but in a different place each time. I believe your students have also sighted one over Boyani. The Assistant District Officer, Bob Smith, and Mr. Glover have all seen it, or similar ones on different occasions, again, over Boyani, although I think the Baniara people said they watched it travel across the sky from our direction. I should think that this is the first time that the saucer has been identified as such. I do not doubt the existence of these things, indeed I cannot, now that I have seen one for myself, but my simple mind still requires scientific evidence before I can accept the from outer space theory. I am inclined to believe that probably many UFOs are more likely some form of electric phenomena, or perhaps something brought about by the atom bomb explosions, etc. That Stephen should actually make out a saucer could be the work of the unconscious mind, as it is very likely that at some time he has seen illustrations of some kind in a magazine, or saucers may exist, but it is only a 50-50 chance that they are not Earth-made, still less that they should carry men, more likely radio-controlled, and it is still unproven that they are solids. It is all too difficult to understand for me. I prefer to wait for some bright boy to catch one to be exhibited in Martin Square. Please return this report, as I have no copy and I want Reverend Norman Crutwell to have it. Yours, Doubting William, Anglican Mission, Boyani. The 27th of June 59, the events of the next day converted the Doubting William, as the next letter graphically indicates. Dear David, life is strange, isn't it? Yesterday I wrote you a letter, which I still intend to send you, expressing opinions re the UFOs. Now, less than 24 hours later, I have changed my views somewhat. Last night we at Boyani experienced about 4 hours of UFO activity, and there is no doubt whatsoever that they are handled by beings of some kind. At times it was absolutely breathtaking. Here is the report. Please pass it around, but great care must be taken, as I have no other, and this, like the one I made out re Stephen, will be sent to Nor. I would appreciate it if you could send the lot back as soon as possible. Cheers. Convinced Bill, as indicated by his notes, Gill saw a bright white light in the northwestern sky. It appeared to be approaching the mission and hovering about 100 meters up. Eventually, 38 people, including Gill, teachers Stephen Gill Moir and Anania Zarata, and Mrs. Nessel Moir, gathered to watch the main UFO, which looked like a large, disc-shaped object. It was apparently solid and circular with a wide base and narrower upper deck. The object appeared to have 4 legs underneath it. There also appeared to be about 4 panels, or portholes, on the side of the object, which seemed to glow a little brighter than the rest. At several intervals, the object produced a shaft of blue light that shone upwards into the sky at an angle of about 45 degrees. What looked like men came out of the object, onto what seemed to be a deck on top of it. There were 4 men in all, occasionally 2, then 1, then 3, then 4. The shaft of blue light and the men disappeared. The object then moved through some clouds. There were other UFO sightings during the night. Gill described the weather as variable sky, scattered clouds to clear at first, becoming overcast after. He estimated the height of the clouds at about 600 meters. The first sighting over the sea, according to Reverend Gill, seemed to be about 150 meters above the water at all times. The main UFO was clearly visible and seemed mostly stationary during the 25 minutes of observation. Astonishingly, the aerial visitor put in a repeat performance the following night, the 27th of June. Gill prepared another statement. Large UFO first sighted by Annie Laurie at 6 p.m. in the apparently the same position as last night, the 26th of June 59, only seemed a little smaller. When WBG saw it at 6:02 p.m. I called Ananias and several others and we stood in the open to watch it. Although the sun had set, it was still quite light for the following 15 minutes. We watched figures appear on top 4 of them, no doubt that they are human. Possibly the same object that I took to be the mother ship last night. 2 smaller UFOs were seen at the same time, stationary, one above the hills west, another overhead. On the large one, 2 of the figures seemed to be doing something near the center of the deck, were occasionally bending over and raising their arms as though adjusting or setting up something not visible. One figure seemed to be standing looking down at us, a group of about a dozen. I stretched my arm above my head and waved. To our surprise, the figure did the same. Ananias waved both arms over his head, then the 2 outside figures did the same. Ananias and self began waving our arms and all 4 now seemed to wave back. There seemed to be no doubt that our movements were answered. All mission boys made audible gasps of either joy or surprise, perhaps both. As dark was beginning to close in, I sent Eric Kodawara for a torch and directed a series of long dashes towards the UFO. After a minute or 2 of this, the UFO apparently acknowledged by making several wavering motions back and forth. Waving by us was repeated and this followed by more flashes of the torch, then the UFO began slowly to become bigger, apparently coming in our direction. It ceased after perhaps half a minute and came no further. After a further 2 or 3 minutes, the figures apparently lost interest in us for they disappeared below deck. At 6:25 p.m. 2 figures reappeared to carry on with whatever they were doing before the interruption. The blue spotlight came on for a few seconds twice in succession. Gil has described how he and the mission people called out to the men, even shouting at them, and beckoned them to descend, but there was no response beyond what has already been noted. 2 smaller UFOs higher up remained stationary. By 6:30 p.m. the scene had remained largely unchanged, and Gil records that he went to dinner. Subsequently, critics were to question this: why would someone walk away from such an extraordinary sight? I'm always asked this question, Gil has said, either in puzzlement or with a sneer. Having had about 4 hours of this sight on Friday night, we were not nearly so interested when it returned on Saturday night, especially after we were unable to persuade it to land. You must also keep in mind that there was nothing eerie or otherworldly about any of this. It was also ordinary as a Ford car. It looked like a perfectly normal sort of object, an Earth-made object. I realized, of course, that some people might think of this as a flying saucer, but I took it to be some kind of hovercraft the Americans or even the Australians had built. The figures inside looked perfectly human. In fact, I thought they were human, that if we got them to the land we would find the pilots to be ordinary Earthmen in military uniforms and we would have dinner with them. At 7 p.m. that no. One UFO was still present, although it appeared somewhat smaller. The group of observers went to church for evensong. After evensong, visibility was very limited with the sky covered in cloud. Nothing else was seen that evening. At 10:40 p.m., a very penetrating, ear-splitting explosion woke up people on the station. It sounded like it had come from just outside the window of the mission house. Jill felt it did not sound like a thunderclap. Nothing had been seen, but the whole sky was overcast. Other less compelling activities occurred the following night. Then it seemed the boy and I visitants had gone. But the controversy had just begun. Reverend Gill was at the time of his sightings already scheduled to return to Australia. This presented civilian groups with an excellent opportunity to assess the credibility of the reports. All investigators found Gill to be very impressive. This led one of the leading civilian groups, the Victorian Flying Saucer Research Society, to view the Gill reports as constituting the most remarkable testimony of intensive UFO activity ever reported to civilian investigators. They were unique because for the first time credible witnesses had reported the presence of humanoid beings associated with UFOs. The major civilian groups of the day, in a spirit of newfound cooperation inspired by the significance of the boy and I observations, distributed copies of Gill's sighting report to all members of the House of Representatives of Australia's Federal Parliament. A letter accompanied the report, signed by the presidents of the participating civilian UFO groups, urging members of Parliament to press the Minister for Air for a statement about the attitude Air Force intelligence had to the New Guinea reports. On the 24th of November 1959 in Federal Parliament, E.D. Cash, a Liberal member from Western Australia, asked the Minister for Air, F.M. Osborne, whether his department, specifically Air Force Intelligence, had investigated the reports. The minister's reply did not address this question, but instead focused on the general situation, indicating that most sightings of UFOs were explained and that only a very small percentage, something like 3% of reported sightings of flying objects cannot be explained. A representative of one UFO group was advised by the Directorate of Air Force Intelligence that the department was awaiting depth of evidence on the New Guinea sightings. However, the department had not even interviewed Gill. Finally, the Minister for Defence requested a report and the RAF interviewed Gill on the 29th of December 1959, some 6 months after the sighting. Gill's recollection of the visit is that the two officers from Canberra talked about stars and planets and then left. He heard no more from them. As one might expect, Jill's account was dismissed by the RAF despite its extraordinary nature and the number of witnesses. The senior interviewing officer, Squadron Leader F.A. Lang, concluded, although the Reverend Jill could be regarded as a reliable observer, it is felt that the June-July incidents could have been nothing more than natural phenomena colored by past events and subconscious influences of UFO enthusiasts. During the period of the report, the weather was cloudy and unsettled with a light thunderstorm. Although it is not possible to draw firm conclusions, an analysis of rough bearings and angles above the horizon does suggest that at least some of the lights observed were the planets Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars. Light refraction, the changing position of the planet relative to the observer, and cloud movement would give the impression of size and rapid movement. Also, varying cloud densities could account for the human shapes and their sudden appearance and disappearance. My own close analysis of the reports suggests that the RAF explanation of either known planets seen through the fast-moving cloud or natural phenomena does not bear up. Over the years there have been several explanations put forward to account for the Boyani sightings, including astronomical misidentification, hoax, cargo cult effects, and that Jill had myopia and astigmatism. In fact, at the time he was wearing correctly prescribed glasses. None of these satisfactorily address the evidence. Dr. Alien Hynek, and staff at his Center for UFO Studies, went to great lengths to investigate and research the affair. Hynek and Alien Hendry, the center's chief investigator, concluded that lesser UFOs seen by Gill were attributable to bright stars and planets, but not the primary object. Its size and absence of movement over 3 hours ruled out an astronomical explanation. My own discussions with Jill led me to the same conclusion. Most recently there was an attempt at explaining the whole affair away by suggesting that Gill and the other witnesses were confused by a false horizon and that all they had been watching was a brightly lit squid boat and crew too busy to do more than just wave at the people on shore. This idea is not tenable when one realizes that Gill was certain that the object he saw was at a 30-degree elevation in the sky. A more radical attempt to dispose of the Gill case came from UFO skeptic Daniel Cohen in his book Myths of the Space Age. The Boyani visitations are enshrined in a classic piece of Australian fiction. Novelist Randolph Stowe's 1979 book Visitants, which has the Boyani visitations as a backdrop to a striking story of confrontation and disintegration, emerged from Stowe's experience as a cadet patrol officer in Papua New Guinea. He was an assistant to the government anthropologist. His novel opens with this sentence: on the 26th of June 1959, at Boyani in Papua, visitants appeared to the Reverend William Booth Gill, himself a visitant of 13 years standing, and to 37 witnesses of another color. The Boyani visitants still stand as remarkable evidence for an impressive aerial anomaly and are regarded as some of the best entity reports on record. At the time of writing, I spoke again with Gill. He remains puzzled by what he saw and was pleased that an authority like Dr. Hynek had independently interviewed him and some of the other witnesses and traveled to the site. While he accepts that the sightings remain unexplained, he questioned my characterization of some attempts to explain them as silly. He felt that these explanations were serious attempts to bring understanding to the events. I think that attitude encapsulates the integrity of Gill and the reality of the affair. In 1973, Alien Hynek visited Australia and Papua New Guinea and found 6 of the witnesses to the Boyani events. They all supported Jill's version of what had happened, based on Reverend Jill's own written statement prepared on location in 1959 and interviews with Jill I undertook, in particular in 1978. See also, Papua, Father Jill Revisited.